Hello, art of business world, salon people. Welcome to another happy hour with Josh. I have my kombucha green tea today. I'll wait as everybody gets in here. Just in case I'm disappointing anyone, I'm not drinking. I am only drinking tea today for happy hour. When the president announced that we'll probably be doing this for another 30 days, I felt like Monday 4:30 drinking can only go on so long. So we're just doing tea today. But I won't judge if anyone else is drinking something stronger. I will also, as we're getting warmed up here, apologize in advance. As soon as I was about to start, some extremely loud thunder started occurring outside my house. So if you hear it, that's what it is. And if my power goes out, which means my internet goes out, and this thing comes to a crashing stop out of nowhere, you will know that what happened was my power went out. So let's hope that doesn't happen. So the agenda for today, I know this is probably the one that we should be drinking for because it's going to be a heavy one. The agenda for today is to navigate, for all the salon people out there, what the varying loans are that got passed through the emergency bills. And we're going to spend the most amount of time on the CARE Act. And what was in the CARE Act is the Payroll Protection Program. And just to keep it simple, we'll just start calling it the PPP. Homemade red wine. Oh, I'm jealous. That sounds good. So, all right. If you have seen a few of my happy hours, you will remember that my first happy hour was all about navigating the legislation, and at the time only 2 bills had passed, and that included the emergency SBA loan. So I'm going to refer to that. I'm not going to go in too deep because I'm going to assume maybe a lot of you saw it, the first happy hour. If you didn't, it's recorded on Art of Business page, so just go back and look at that. But I will update the information that's come out since then, and then we're going to dive into the new one, which is the Payroll Protection Program. So because, sorry, I don't know if that was a power glitch or what. So because that is the newest and the one that everyone's talking about, that's that $350 billion that everyone's talking about that was in the new bill. Let's get into that one first. Hello, Carol. All right, so first of all, who is eligible for the new PPP Payroll Protection Program bill or loan? The short answer is probably most everyone that's watching. Anyone that's under 500 people, sole proprietors, self-employed, even independent contractors, for those of you out there, are eligible for this. So pretty much everyone is eligible in terms of the type of organization or employee you are, if you're a sole proprietor or an independent contractor. So in terms of what makes you eligible in terms of criteria, so this loan is going to be applied to a third-party lender. So that's an important distinction because if you remember, or if you didn't know, the emergency SBA loan, which we talked about before, I'll revisit at the end of this, this particular happy hour as well, that goes directly through the SBA website. So anytime people are getting confused, and I think they're combining the two, so anything that you're applying directly to the SBA website is this emergency EIDL loan, which is different from the newest bill, which goes through a third-party bank. So in terms of who to talk to, any SBA lender would be the person to talk to. I suggest a place to start would be if you have a current banking relationship, whether it's because of the loan you have now or because of just your banking services. That's probably the first place you should call to find out if they do those loans or if they're going to do those loans. Now, I will also add that while the bill went through Friday, no one is currently accepting applications to these loans yet. There is some rumors and speculation as to when these applications are going to start. I've heard as soon as Wednesday, and then more recently I heard Friday. But what's happening is all these SBA lenders are scrambling to find out what they need to do, and quite honestly, it's not even really clear yet. But we're hoping maybe by the end of this week we can start applying for these. So one important note is that to apply to qualify for these loans, you have to be able to show or certify that you were impacted by the coronavirus outbreak. And I would imagine that every salon in America can certify that. So I think that's one big point that you will all qualify for. The other certification is that you're going to use the proceeds of the loan to retain workers, maintain payroll, make mortgage or lease payments, and utility payments. So this particular loan is specifically for those uses only, which is a little different than the other loan. So this loan is very specific in what you're allowed to use it for, and it's those things. I'll list them again. For payroll and payroll-related costs, lease and mortgage payments, and utility payments. That's what these loans are intended to use for. So you have to certify that. The other thing that you need to certify is that you are not getting a duplicitous, in other words, another loan for these same uses. Now here's where it's a little confusing. You might think that, wow, that means you can't apply for both this loan and the other SBA emergency loan. That might be true. We're not exactly clear, but I think the reality is you could apply for both and just accept one, don't accept both. Or maybe if you are able to certify that you're going to use the second one for things other than payroll, mortgage, utilities, that you might be able to take both. However, that's a little bit unclear, and you're probably going to want to talk to your SBA lender to verify that. So I know I'm getting into a little nitpicking stuff here, but I just want to make sure I can unload everything I've learned. And I spent a lot of time immersing myself in this, but a disclaimer, I am not an expert. So, all right, so let's get into how the loan works. The first and foremost, and which is probably one of the most exciting parts of the loan, is that there is no personal guarantee associated to this loan. So you're not going to have to, mortgage your house or do anything to qualify that requires a personal guarantee, which means they're not going to, take your home from you if somehow you're unable to pay this loan. So that's a really important point relative to some other traditional loans. Number two, how much money can you get from this Pact program? So what they say is you can get 2.5 times your monthly payroll costs, not to exceed $10 million, which I don't think anyone's going to have that problem. So let's just say I'm going to use simple math here. Let's say you're a $500,000 revenue salon and your payroll costs are about 60% of your revenue. So that means in a year, you spend $300,000 on payroll. So if you divide that by 12, that is your monthly payroll cost. So I probably should have done this on the fly and put all that pressure on myself. So 300 divided by 12, 25. See, that should have been easy. So in that scenario, you would have a monthly payroll cost of $25,000. So 2.5 times your monthly payroll cost would be how much you could borrow. So in this case, it would have been about 50 plus half of 25, $62,500. So that is what the potential borrowing you can make from this loan. All right. Next part that's important to note. The other really, really exciting part of these loans, and the reason why everyone's probably going to be applying for them, is that they are offering your 8 weeks of loan forgiveness for any payroll costs associated in the first 8 weeks of the loan. So let me repeat that and explain it. So let's just say, I'm going to just make up some numbers, you're borrowing $50,000, and in the first 8 weeks, you spend $25,000 on, I'm sorry, I said payroll, there's a little more than payroll, on payroll, rent, and utilities, and associated payroll costs. If in the first 8 weeks you spend $20,000, $20,000 of your $50,000 loan will be forgiven. You'll never have to pay it back. That's pretty unbelievable. However, there's a little bit of a but to this that is going to impact a lot of salons just as it's going to impact Art of Business. Here's the thing. You can only get your first 8 weeks of the loan forgiven. So what that means is, and you can only forgive expenses that occur. So let's just say in that same example, you borrow $50,000, but in the first 5 weeks, you're not open because you're not allowed to be open. And so you're still, and you've laid off your team, which most everyone has. So if you're not paying your people in those first 5 weeks, there's no payroll cost to be forgiven. So to get the true benefit of the 8-week forgiveness, you have to be paying payroll that whole 8 weeks. Now, here's the question everyone's going to ask themselves, and this is just my opinion, my commentary, this is not fact. So does that mean you should go hire everyone back the second you get the loan, even if you're not open? Well, one version of that answer would be, well, if I'm going to get the money back and it's going to be forgiven, why not? Well, before you go rush out and do that, there's two things you should consider. Number one is that you don't know when you're going to be able to open. So that 8 weeks could come and go. You can still have people on your payroll and you're still not open. So you're going to be taking that risk. But here's the other thing. Because of the other provision in the bill, which is that unemployment is getting juiced up $600 a week for everybody on unemployment, there's actually a good chunk of your staff that might be making more money on unemployment than they would if they were back on your payroll, particularly if you're not doing any services. So, and yes, someone commented, that's why they're already drinking. Yes, I know, it's starting to get confusing, so forgive me if it is. But where I'm getting with this is, while it's really exciting that you can have loan forgiveness, to enjoy the full benefit of that on your payroll, you really want to get the loan close to the time that you're going to open. Because if you have because the 8 week clock starts ticking the moment you get the money. So now I don't know if it's as simple as saying, hey, I applied for the loan, but I don't want to get I won't tell the bank to not give me the money for 4 weeks. I don't know. We're going to ask that question when we apply. So it might not be that simple, but I just want you to know you're not going to get 8 weeks of payroll forgiveness if you're not actually paying the payroll. That's the most important point. However, it will cover your rent, it will cover your utilities and while you're not open. So that no matter what is a win. So I'm not trying to say this isn't a great thing no matter what, but I just want to make sure people understand how that 8 weeks of forgiveness works. And then whatever isn't forgiven becomes a normal loan at 4% interest rate for 10 years. So it's still great access to cheap capital without having to put a personal guarantee down. But to get the true benefit of the 8 weeks, that's what it is. And one other point is that the personal guarantee, as I understand it, no, actually, I'm sorry, I'm confusing the loans. Forget what I was about to say. Okay, I'm going to take a breath because I know I just threw up a bunch on everyone. I'm going to take a sip of my tea and let you guys take a sip of your drink. Question I just saw is, Patty, I think I answered your question. It's the 8 weeks it starts when the loan is paid, not when you open. So if you get the loan before you're open, you're on the ticker before the salon's open. Can the loan cover rent costs? Yes, the answer is yes. So I'll just want to go real quickly once again what the loan can cover. The loan can cover payroll, rent, interest, and utilities. Okay. The question about can it cover leave for unemployees or unemployment, I'm not really sure I understand that because the government's paying that leave. You're not paying that. So there's nothing to be compensated there. Okay. So in terms of when these loans are going to start being paid, they don't actually know. I just read an article that said, although the government is saying in the next 15 days that the SBA lenders are not organized to do that, and so it could be longer. But I'm just, so you might want to just say that, if we're able to apply in the next week, the money could be paid out as soon as 2 weeks from today, or maybe even longer. But then again, remember, it might be in our best interest, depending on your financial situation, to wait, and 4 weeks could be better than 2 weeks for many of us, because if we're going to open April 30th, just say, for example, which may or may not occur, and we are open and paying our hairdressers, we could actually get that payroll basically covered for us while we're open and providing services. So that would be pretty amazing for many salons to be able to operate for 8 weeks, basically payroll free. Now you would probably chew up most of your loan doing that, but hey, I mean, what a great benefit. So, okay. So I want to transition now to the other loan, which is, to remind you guys, it's called the EIDL, which is the Small Business Emergency Loan. It only is applicable in areas that declared a disaster, which in our marketing areas, all the states we service, I think California as well, and many other states. So I think most everyone probably is able to qualify for this. So, sorry, the question about health insurance costs. Yes, health benefits costs can be covered as part of your payroll costs. So the other one is kind of interesting. So the other one, you apply directly through the SBA website. That application process is currently up and running. And so you could be applying right now. Now, I will tell you that it seems like the application process for that one is probably a little more cumbersome. There's a little more documentation needed, although with that being said, I have not actually seen what the documentation for the PPP loans is going to be, but what they're saying is that it's probably going to be a little easier than the traditional SBA loan, which requires, which this one requires the same documentation. So the EIDL requires tax returns for 3 years, personal financial statement. However, here's the one thing on this. If you borrow less than $200,000, which I presume many of you will, you do not need a personal guarantee for this one either, which is huge. Because if you go over that, you will need a personal guarantee, including some a lien on some of your property and even your house. So if you're going to do the EIDL, I would highly encourage you to do lower than $200,000. That loan is 3.5% interest rate, which is very cheap, and that is a 30-year payback period. So a really, really generous long loan. Oh, I'm sorry. One other point on the last loan, the PPP, is you have 6 months. So in addition to getting the 8 weeks of forgiveness, you have 6 months of payment holiday. So you won't even start paying your first payment until 6 months expires. Sorry about that. All right, but back to the EIDL. It's a 30-year loan. It's 3.5%. And here's and $200,000 or less, no personal guarantee, and they just use your FICA credit score. So you will need to have a certain credit score. I don't know exactly what that credit score is, but I would say if you have half decent credit, you should be fine with that one. Now here's a really intriguing part about this one. Every single person that applies gets a $10,000 cash grant within 3 days of application. So you receive a $10,000 check just for applying. And if you are turned down for this loan, you still get the $10,000. That $10,000 never needs to be paid back. Now, $10,000 isn't a life-changing amount of money, but I certainly would take $10,000 for free. So while the other loan in totality is a better loan, I wouldn't totally disregard this option. And I will tell you that the entire world is going to be going after the other loan. So there is a school of thought that says, you know what, maybe you should just go after this one because who knows if the other money is going to run out. I suspect it will run out, although Congress will probably, if it does, potentially allow for more money to go into that fund, but we'll see. So that EIDL loan is also good for sole proprietorships and independent contractors. And the limit for that loan is basically up to 100. If you're a sole proprietor or independent contractor, basically they'll give you a loan of up to $100,000, and you'd have to just basically show your personal income. And if you are less than $100,000, they'll just match your annual income. If you're over $100,000, they'll give you up to $100,000. So that is basically what the differences in the two loans. I know I threw up on everybody. So do I have a typed summary of this? Christopher, I have something that the Chamber of Commerce put together that I will put on the recorded version of this. So once this is uploaded and the recorded version is on our site, I will have a link to this really simple Chamber of Commerce 3-page document that walks through the basics of the PPP loan. That one will definitely be up. So do I have any other questions? Let's see. I always try to keep these at 20 minutes. We're about 19 minutes in. So let's see if anyone else has a question before we depart. I'm not seeing, although I know there's a delay. So basically my summary to this is it's very confusing. So I got a question. Is that the same as the SBA 7A? I believe the 7A is a traditional SBA loan. So a traditional SBA loan is a 6% loan, 10 years. That's the loan that the SBA has been doing for forever. I believe that the EIDL is different than the traditional SBA. Although I've been told if you have a traditional SBA, you should call the lender that you used for that SBA and see if you can add to it or roll into the EIDL and just keep it all together. So the question is, can you apply for the SBA and this loan? So what I was saying before is you could probably apply for both. You certainly can't accept both. You can only accept one or the other, most likely. And there was a little bit of confusing language because in the application process for the PPP, there is a question that it asks you, and it says, I'll read it. Does the borrower certify that you do not have an application pending for a loan duplicative of the purpose and amounts applied for here? Now, that you might say, well, that means you can't apply for another loan, but maybe what I think you could argue that if this loan, the PPP, is for payroll, rent, and what have you, you could potentially get another loan to cover your supplier costs or other debt you might have. So it might not necessarily be duplicitous. So it's tough to totally say, but I think the safe thing to do would be to just apply for one first and then ask the lender what their opinion is. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. Where is the mustache, Brian? I told you I lost a game of Uno as a bet with my kids, and they forced me to shave it. It was not a popular thing in the Hafetz household. Sorry. And if you're asking what did you talk about my mustache, go look at an older happy hour. All right. Question was, is an LLC the same as a sole proprietor? No, LLC is a corporation, so they're both covered. You have nothing to worry about. The LLC is probably going to provide you with a more potential to get a larger loan, because if you're a sole proprietor, your loan limit's going to be just basically your own annual personal income. That's good, Jay. Okay, I'll give one last second for questions. These are all good questions. What do I know about family paid leave? And okay, so the family paid leave, so it's a really long conversation, and I would say I covered it in my first webinar, but basically if they're not on your payroll, this family paid leave doesn't even apply. So I think in many cases, since a lot of salons already laid off their team, the pay leave isn't really an issue. It would be more of an issue if you bring them back and then and then somebody potentially gets sick from coronavirus or would like to elect family paid leave to stay with their child. Then essentially what you'll be forced to do is pay them 2/3 of their income, and this is in a summary, and then get a credit back from the government on that. So that's the paid leave. Someone missed, Brenda, you missed, I did cover that in the beginning. If you've already put your team on unemployment, you can bring them back, and that will enable you to use the loan, the PPP loan, to cover those costs. So if you brought them, if you laid them off, you can bring them back. Although before you decide to bring them back, you might want to just make sure you don't do it too soon, because if this thing drags on for more than another 8 weeks, you could end up having your team on payroll, and then you still won't be open. But that's a calculation I'll leave to all of you guys. Okay, I think this is a good jumping off point. I appreciate you guys sticking with me and joining me for my happy hours. Hopefully you guys are getting a little something out of this. And once we get through all the legislative part of this, all the things that are coming out, we'll transition to some lighter topics, I promise. So with that, cheers everyone.